Hey everybody, Michelle Mai here over at College Planning Source. I thought today would be a good day to do a stats webinar, and so let's jump into this. I'll turn off my screen here so that way you don't get distracted by me. But let's jump into stats, and these are our stats from the class of 2024. Okay, let's do this. All right. So the class of 2024, we had 8 wonderful counselors here, total of 177 students, which spanned across 56 different high schools. Total number of applications submitted was 3,299. Average number of applicants submitted by a student was 18, which is up quite a bit from the year before, which was roughly about 14. And what we did was we started to look at students in terms of what majors they applied for. And so for all of our students here, here's the breakdown in terms of percentages for the different categories, since there's so many different majors out there that the students applied into. So as you can see, the two that were the most popular were computer science, data science, statistics, and natural sciences, and we'll cover a few of the different types of natural sciences in here as well. Next up would be business, and then of course engineering. We'll cover a lot today, so we'll go over the stats and we'll kind of try to do a little deep dive into kind of the inner workings of the insight on the stats as well. Okay, so with the categories, as you can see here, here's some of the majors that are within each of these categories. Business, all the related business areas, including economics, finance, entrepreneurship, data science and computer science and statistics also included game design. Engineering was all disciplines of engineering, anything with the word engineering, aka another fancy word for designer, right, are in that engineering category. Humanities, math, natural sciences, like I was saying, does include biology, chemistry, physics, marine science, kinesiology, biotech, astrophysics, and environmental science. Nursing, which nursing schools have different types of entry, including like direct entry or priority. And then we did separate out psychology, since there is a decent number of students that apply into psychology or related majors like neuroscience, cognitive science, and brain sciences. Then we have our social sciences and then undeclared. So those are the major categories. With the stats for UCs, as you can see here, we had about 154 students that applied to the UCs. Totaling, we had a total number of 177 students, so a larger percentage of the students that we had applied to the UCs, and the average number of campuses applied to was roughly about a little over 6, so about 7 of them versus 6 the prior year. And then we did this just to kind of help out with showing like just trends, and I don't, as many of you know, like stats are good for reference, but they're not necessarily the live and die by, if that makes sense. And we'll go deeper into that too, because as you probably know, just with majors and some of the more competitive majors, like the major can make a difference in terms of probability of admissions, right? So I thought I'd just put this up here so you guys can see, based on where the distribution of students by campus, where the percentages of the students got into that applied in. And then of course, as you can see here, the range of GPA for the students that got accepted. And we tried to show this in the best way possible, but as you can see, there's a greater than 4.5, but at the same time, not all schools offer a maximum GPA of 4.5. So kind of categorize some of these together. So I hope that helps. It's just important to see a rather significant number, I felt like, of students that got into UCSD and then also UCLA this year. Typically almost about the same number of students that we got into UCLA as UCSD, which was quite interesting. But we also have some great students. So yep, something to think about. And then the California State University stats here, as you can see, we had 145 students that applied to Cal State. And the average number of campuses applied to was 3.63, so like 4 campuses. And we had a larger percentage of students that applied to the CSUs as well. So by campus, like percentage of our students applied to these campuses from all the total number of applications that were submitted. So I hope that helps. Definitely San Diego State's number one, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Those are probably the most popular campuses for students to apply to. And then, of course, we have like Long Beach and Pomona, Fullerton, San Jose State. Yeah. We did do this just to kind of share this information, average weighted GPA for those accepted by some of these top tiered schools. And, you know, for top tiered schools, I guess you could say, and it depends on major too. I will throw that out there, mainly because like I've had a student that's gotten in to NYU with a 3.4 before, you know what I mean? So it's not like these are the end all be all. I just want to stress that. But for reference points, you know, for the majority of our students, you know, the average GPA to get into some of these schools was like a 4.33. Okay. And then likelihood. I love this because what I've noticed is that with us, we always encourage a balanced list of schools, especially ones that are a best fit for the student, which takes some time to kind of go through identifying, you know, their majors of interest, the type of environment that they would be most comfortable in. And as you can see right here, we're pretty consistent. So when people ask us, you know, what are likely schools or target schools or reach schools or far reach schools, it goes beyond just statistics. I feel like, you know, the major makes a big difference, which is really difficult to find online in terms of like the major and their acceptance rates. But also on top of that would be like what high school they go to, because obviously different high schools have different maximum GPAs. But as you can see right here, you know, we've been very, very consistent when we call out a likely school that students are getting in like basically 97% to 100% of the time. Target schools on average are like 72 to 82% of the time. I remind you, this is one of the years is during COVID too. So, and even in different admission environments, we've still remained really consistent with the likelihoods and their acceptances. So, yep, yeah, it's definitely these 2 years were kind of interesting just during like COVID years and right afterwards. But then also, you know, it's more typical that we would see like roughly about 10% or less of the time that the students are getting to their far reach schools. And I bring this up because we just want to make sure that we have a nicely balanced list of schools. So always recommended like 1 to 3 likely schools, 4 to 8 target schools, 5 or less reach or far reach schools, at least in that group A of schools that we prioritize to ensure that we're getting the requirements completed, the essays well developed and edited and completed to really share and highlight, you know, the uniqueness and the perspective of the students. But then from there, you know, students will have a group B list. What we found is that if you have milestones in this process when you're applying, first you feel like you're achieving a lot, and then second off, you're also, you know what I mean, you have points where you can make decisions in terms of keeping certain schools on or taking some of them off. I also feel like, you know, it's a lot easier to focus in on roughly, you know, 10 to 14, 15 schools or so to begin with and ensure that those applications, the full applications, you know what I mean, really represent the student versus trying to, you know, attack like 20 or 30 schools at the same time. It becomes overwhelming. So you just want to make sure that you're, you know, you're doing this in the most efficient way because the applications, they open up like midsummer and they're due pretty much by like beginning of or by the end of November. So we're beginning of December. And so you just want to make sure that the time that the students put into this yield results that the students would be happy with and that they have options. I don't care who you are. I always say this, you know, it's always nicer to have more wins than losses. And realistically, the students only go to one school. So keep that in mind. Yeah, I hope this helps. And then we did just go and pull the UC admission stats off of their site. So we just put them into a nice little table here for you guys. So I hope this helps in terms of just seeing what the average GPAs are for admission. But I also, you know what I mean, I always say use them as reference, but don't live and die by them. where the student goes to school, also the major, their profile, how competitive the major is, makes a big difference in this whole process too. But this is the mid 50th percentile range of the students that are getting accepted. And then I always say, like, what would you think by looking at that? And I think sometimes it discourages students, but it's not, the point of this wasn't to discourage anybody or make anybody really stressed out. But I do think that there are some factors in the admissions process to, yield success, right? And the factors that contribute to admission success are definitely first in the eye of the beholder. Not all students want or should go to highly competitive schools, right? They want to set the students up for success next to one another. So they want to make sure that the students can handle the academics next to one another, along with contributing to the learning environment or the intellectual vitality of the campus. I also noticed, we noticed that many students are happy with where they go despite the tier of the school. And when a student's happy, they tend to thrive. So just keep that in mind and spend some time upfront looking at schools. I think it's really important because they are very different from one another. But please feel free to check our website under the knowledge base. I know that we're starting to do a lot more kind of college spotlights. One of our counselors here likes to kind of highlight some of the colleges that she visits and share some helpful information for students. And the solution behind all this is to find the right fit, and that takes a little time. Like I said, visit colleges, first start locally, maybe just go to a local UC, maybe a local state school, maybe a local private school, just to see the differences between them and kind of the different programs and the types of environments they are before, starting to search, further out, and then start to do things like you could do virtual visits. Some of these schools love to see students that demonstrate some sort of interest in the school by maybe emailing the regional admissions officer, or doing a virtual tour on the applications. I'm sure that those of you that have gone through the process already know that the colleges will oftentimes, especially the Common App colleges, will ask, like, how did you learn about the school? And they'll give you a few different options to be able to check off to showcase, how did you learn about the school? And assuming that, the more demonstrated interest you show, the greater the likelihood, if they accept you, that you would attend. And then also, like I said, start visiting, researching these schools early. This all takes time, so please keep that in mind. And parents, before you go, take the time to, fly, drive, spend time and the money on that. Make sure that you do the net price calculators before going to visit. I notice that sometimes, it's kind of like test driving cars. You want to make sure that everybody wants a Ferrari, but we want to make sure that we get, if our budget's like a Civic or a Mazda or something like that, we just want to make sure that we're managing expectations along the way to ensure, like, happiness for everybody, right? And I would say find the carrot. Some students are, once they find that school, they know this is the type of environment that I want to be a part of. It could be based on finding, career interest first, and then majors second, getting involved with some of these by identifying like a few different majors. Then the student can get involved with activities, and that helps to give them some sort of exposure and experience within some of these subjects or disciplines. But then that actually will help in terms of when they're looking at schools, what schools offer these majors that help lead to these careers that they're interested in going into. So I always say find the carrot, and that usually helps with students in terms of figuring out, like, what they want to get involved with and their motivation to be involved with these things. Factors that that are obvious are GPA, standardized tests, if they're even looked at, right, like the SAT or ACT, and extracurricular activities, which is essentially their resume of like how they choose to spend their time, outside the classroom or in activities related to their classroom subjects. So just keep that in mind, because I think that you want to find things to help them organically explore, but also build their resume at the same time, so the colleges can see how that student is motivated to further their interest in certain subjects or areas or groups of people that they want to help, etc. And GPA, like I said, can vary. It really depends on the school and what their maximum GPA is. I know around here, if a student's on a quarter system, they could take more challenging courses like AP courses or IB courses, and then that then helps with their GPA. So the maximum GPA could be very different depending on the schools. Yeah, so keep that in mind. Other factors that contribute are like strategic course selection. I always say consider the student's bandwidth, right? I've noticed that students that might come in as freshmen and maybe their school doesn't allow them to take AP courses their freshman year or limits the number of courses that they can take their freshman year. And then maybe they take one their sophomore year and then they jump into like six of them their junior year. That junior year is telling, just because you want to make sure that you can showcase that you can, for the courses that you do take on, that you can handle those courses, right? As it's indicative of like the academic rigor that you can handle while you're in college as well. Other factors, strategic course selection. I know that every school, every high school has, one or two teachers that just might be really difficult graders, or what I mean, difficult to be able to do well in the class and outside of just the student's ability to learn. So consider that in terms of what courses that you might want to take at the school. And then some more and more, just to be honest with you, we see these students that are taking third-party courses for credit through high schools, like on-demand courses through like UC Scout or BYU High School Online, or there's a number of them out there. But be strategic in the courses and what levels you want to be at, what levels the colleges are looking for, especially depending on the subject that they're interested in going to, and where they should be at to be, about the same level as the other students that are getting in to that university, especially for that major. Community college courses are also options for students. Once some schools have dual enrollment with certain local community colleges, but students could take these community colleges courses during the school year or even during the summer. So I mean, just plan out the course like path for the student. I think it's really important to do ahead of time. It's always really hard when a student jumps into a class, hoping that they're going to do well, but doesn't realize how maybe they wouldn't be able to. Maybe you're taking four different difficult courses, but there's always that one teacher that might require, the majority of their time, and then these other courses where they would naturally or probably do well, maybe they aren't able to do well in those courses because their focus is on that one course that is really difficult. So keep that in mind in terms of just keeping a balance, making sure that you're strategic with your course selection, and also when you're taking those courses, right? You're taking them during the year, during the summer, first half of the year, second half of the year, alongside, all these other extracurricular activities. Like we have students that are involved with sports, and they know, if I take a course in my last course, but I need to be gone for my sport a lot, that might be difficult for that student to do well in that class. So just be aware, once you get your course selection, just be aware early on about how you're doing in that class or how the student's doing in that class, and then make decisions from there. Academic rigor, like I said, this is something that the student can control, right? But if you look up like UC approved honors courses by campus, online, you could actually see the average number of UC approved honors courses, AP courses, IB courses, or transferable college courses, which are all basically weighted courses that a student that's being accepted has on average. And then also on top of that, like what percentage, what percentage of students might have like 10 or more, or 5 to 9 one UC approved honors, AP, IB, or transferable college courses that are admitted or decide to enroll. So you could see all that in advance. So I would take some time again this all takes time. So you just want to make sure that you are planning this in advance and not waiting till the last minute, because it's always really hard to try to squeeze in 2 additional classes to be able to try to put yourself in that kind of the same academic rigor realm as other students that are getting accepted. And then of course showing proficiency in higher levels of academic subjects that tilt towards their major. For some of the higher tiered schools, we tend to see students that have taken like AP Calc AB, sometimes even AP Calc BC before they even go into their their senior year when they're applying to colleges, so they show proficiency in these higher levels of these academic subjects ahead of time. So, and it just depends on the major that you're interested in going to as well. I, I think somebody very kind for showing me this online, but this is actually UCI, and they're the only UC that does this, which is really nice to see. But you can see right here, the number of students that applied versus admitted. This is the selectivity rate versus the admitted to enrolled, which is the yield rate. Okay, but if we look at this, look at aerospace engineering, 24.2. You can see, some years are a little higher, some years a little lower, but they tend to average out, right? And we have to remember that the schools have like a limited amount of resources and are also funded by the state too. So it's not like they can have half of the school there for a specific major due to their resources, right? But then if we look down here at applied physics, it's 45.8. I'm not telling you to go in for applied physics, but I think it is helpful when you're looking at stats like I showed you before, when it comes to the average GPA for certain UC campuses based on admission. And you'll probably notice that, like, depending on the major, can raise or lower your probability of admissions. So, some students might think, oh, hey, I have a 4.4, so that should be a likely school. Well, I would wonder what major that they're going into, because for certain majors like business, they'll have like an 11%, selectivity rate, or computer science was at a 16% selectivity rate at UCI, but the year before that was at like about 6%, so please be careful with, just assuming likelihood. I think that that's a important factor to be thoughtful of, because major can make a big difference. And, another example would be Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, where psychology is their most, competitive major to get into by the number of applicants versus the amount of space that they have for freshman applicants. So please keep that in mind. Factors that contribute to admission success, engagement in the college planning process from an early start. Like I said, actively working towards learning and growing is really helpful. Organically exploring and building their resumes, also, showcasing their interest in specific academic areas, might be passion projects, or when they do get involved with these activities, beyond just the number of hours per week, weeks per year that they're putting in, it's also the perspective that they gain from these activities that the colleges look to see, how that might contribute, like I said, to the learning environment, or the contribute to the intellectual vitality of the campus, as the UCs like to say. Organized application process. It's always good to, let's start early, start looking at schools, build that balance list, make sure that what you need to do, when you need to do it, reverse engineer everything. If we know that we have all these requirements, all these essays, you want to build out a pace to be able to get everything done in a good amount of time, and the time that they have, because we also know by the time they hit senior year, typically they're busier than ever with all their activities and the courses that they're taking. And so just please keep that in mind. And then the other part of that would be block time out to write. It's probably my biggest piece of advice to students that are seniors, just because I've noticed that like I said, they get busy. So saying, hey, I'll just wait till this weekend to work on these essays, or other things tend to pop up, right? But if you block time out, once a day, once every other day, you'll get a lot more done. Some days will be more productive than others, but then by that, that you have that time and that space to work on these applications and these essays. So uncontrollable factors, you know what I mean? I think that a lot of times we keep pushing, or the students believe that, I need to keep pushing. But there are some uncontrollable factors by, colleges, they might need students to pay full price, or, they might be what we call need aware. So, they can't have everybody there on financial aid or full pay financial aid. So these are what we call need aware schools, right? So keep that in mind. Colleges restrictions to the number of students, especially in public schools, the state tells the UCs this is how many students that will help to fund. They divide those amongst the different campuses. Campuses have to look at their resources and determine like how many students can we have in these different departments. So, it's not like, again, we just have an unlimited amount of seats in these UCs that the students, that are eligible will get, right? That's why, the wait lists are a big thing nowadays too, because they can't go over their numbers as they're funded by the state. So that's why they'll accept some students, put a lot of these other students that are eligible on the wait list, wait to see who decides to accept, and then start cherry picking them off the wait list, as they deem fit, right? Colleges resource teach students, like I said, how competitive is the major that you're looking at. So will likely vary the student's likelihood to get into that school. So is it now not a likely school? It might be a target school just based on how competitive the major is. How colleges review applications. Some colleges will actually look at the student holistically. Some colleges are quantitative, so just they have these different factors. They assign numbers to these different factors, and if that number is above a certain level, then you're in. And then some schools might be a hybrid of the two. So I think more and more people think this is formulaic, but in the college world, it's not always formulaic. So at least with admission. So please keep that in mind. Also, schools need to protect their rankings, both yield, which is yield to enrollment rates, and acceptance rates can serve as a criteria that impact national rankings. So this is basically the number of students that are admitted versus the number of students that enroll, right? That's your yield rate. Acceptance rates are the number of students that apply versus are admitted. And this is, if a school looks like they accept 80% of their students, a lot of people optically might think that, this is not a great school because they accept so many students. So, there's some optics behind this. I do think that I can tell you some stories of, students that we'll get into. I'm sure you guys have heard these stories too. Why is it this student got into UCLA and maybe Georgetown, but got waitlisted at San Diego State? San Diego State probably had to think, what's likely the student's actually going to come to our school based on, their profile, right? And then of course, some of these factors play into rankings, like I said, and I would advise, everybody looks at rankings, and when you go and you look up what makes up these rankings, very few of them, if not any of them, actually look up like student happiness or quality of undergraduate, education or like instruction, excuse me. So, just be conscious of these things that these are rankings, but know what the rankings are based off of. One of the, just to kind of highlight, and you can Google this too. It's nothing that I'm making up. I'm just pulling them off of offline and kind of interpreting this. But if you look at Boston University in 2024, approximately 60% of their incoming freshman class was admitted ED. That's 100% yield to enrollment, right? Understandably so. They want to make sure that the students that they accept come to their school. But at the same time, there's other factors that are out of the students' control, is what I was trying to get at here. And so some of these other schools like Brown, UPenn, Dartmouth, NYU, over the years, they've had, years where they've had more than 50% of their incoming freshman class was admitted early decision. And then how many students a college wants to take from a specific high school, that's also another factor. I mean, they can't just take every student that has over a 4.2, that wants to go into computer science at UCSD. They're going to want to be somewhat fair about it, right? So it might not be fair by year, it could be fair over the years, but these are factors that they have to consider too. No, students don't get in from the top down all the time. It's not like it used to be. I feel like a lot of parents these days, when I talk to them, they'll tell me they maybe only applied to like one or 3 or 4 schools. When I first started about almost 20 years ago now, students were only applying to roughly like 4 to 6 schools. And now here, the average is 18. So Just keep that in mind that the schools don't always just say, okay, we're just everybody who has over this GPA, we're going to accept. They're starting to be a little bit more picky and choosy because they want the students that would actually come to their school, right? Moral of the story, yes, these are stats. Second off, yes, they're good for reference, but don't live and die by them. There's always the outliers, but be thoughtful about building that balanced list of schools, especially the ones that are best fit for the student, which do take a little time in the process to identify, right? Students should live high school a little less for college and a little more for themselves, but always be working towards something. I always say, do the things that make them happy and present themselves to colleges as they are, because no matter how hard they try to make themselves the perfect applicant for colleges, at the end of the day, there's still a whole lot of chance and something's out of their control. So I read this from one of this anonymous Berkeley student who said, push yourself in high school, but do so in a way that brings you fulfillment. And I couldn't agree more. So yeah, I hope that helps. Just a little webinar on stats. I try, like I said, the stats are for reference. We like to share them. And as you can probably see, we don't only work with students that are over a 4.2. We truly believe that every student has a place that will bring that, will give them a great education, also a great college experience. I just think that, just be conscious of like taking the time in advance to figure that out. Yeah, so great. Thanks for joining. And hopefully that helps everybody. All right. Bye.